Well, we'll kick it off with this tonight. King Misizulu Kazwelithini has expressed grief at the passing of AmaZulu traditional Prime Minister Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And as a mark of respect, he's cancelled tomorrow's Reed Dance ceremony. For more on the story, we're joined by Newzroom Africa's Ziyanda Ngobo, who is at Buthelezi's homestead in northern KwaZulu-Natal. Ziyanda, good evening to you. So quite significant then that what is usually a weekend of a celebration for young maidens and of course for members of the Zulu nation, this has now been cancelled to mark what is really the end of an era again for the Zulu nation.
Absolutely. 7 decades serving 3 kings of the AmaZulu royal household, AmaZulu monarchs, I should say, in fact. And so it was only apt then for King Misizulu Kazwelithini to declare tomorrow as cancelled. Let's listen to what he had to say and why this was so important for the AmaZulu nation.
Akusiyona into ejwayelekile. Ngikhala kanye nani, ngikhalela isizwe. Umsebenzi umntwana awenzile ngingasasho umsebenzi wasedlukulu nje kuphela. Nokumele iqiniso kwaze kwaba kusekugcineni. Sithe namhlanje uhlelo aluzukufana njengokujwayelekile. Ngoba ngokomthetho wesintu, umthetho wesiZulu, umthetho wasedlukulu, mase kuze kwavela isimo esinzima kangaka, akungabe sisakhulunywa phezu kwaso, akungabe kusaba khona izinkulumo ukuhlonipha isimo esibhekene naso njengesizwe.
So that's the AmaZulu king saying that he is crying and is mourning with the AmaZulu nation. In fact, then going ahead to make that announcement that the second part of the Reed dance, the annual Reed dance, where Zulu maidens really pride themselves for their virginity and the way they've carried themselves according to cultural customs, has now turned into a moment to reflect on the life and times of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Let's hear what he had to say earlier.
Nginabesilo ukuhlonipha isimo somntwana sithe nondunankulu wesifunda umhlanga wakusasa kawuzubabikho asidedele usuku lakusasa kube usuku lokuba sibuyele emakhaya ngokuhlonipha isimo esibhekene naso Zulu mnyama. Okusho ukuthi namhlanje siyawuvala umhlanga sesiyoze siwubone ngonyaka ozayo.
Now, as we continue to reflect on the life of Buthelezi, you would know, Kathy, that many have spoken about Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi's life as being complex, his legacy as being layered, seeing many tributes or remembrances from those who loved and cared for him, but contrasting that with others who would have remembered and been sad, but in a different way, talking about, Katlehong, Tsakane, Vosloorus, the 90s, the violence between the ANC and IFP. And I speak about this because the ANC itself has also sent out messages of condolence, in particular the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, the ANC Premier Nomusa Dube also coming to KwaPhindangene earlier today, but also Siboniso Duma, the ANC KZN chair, reflecting on the life of Buthelezi. Really, also it's a moment to highlight the interlinkedness, I should say, of the two parties, both from a historical perspective but also from a political party aspect. So I wanted to play that bite from Duma as well.
Sifikile kithi indaba ezibuhlungu zokudlula emhlabeni umntwana kaPhindangene yize singuhulumeni wesifundazwe besazi ke ngokuba buthakathaka komntwana besinethemba ukuthi uzolulama njengoba besephuma ezibhedlela. Siyaqonda kakhulu ke umntwana kaphinde angelo bengumgogodla wesizwe ingakho inhlangano ebusayo kaKhongolose silesikhulu sijube undunankulu mama noMsadube encoba ukuthi ayoba ingxenye osibonela khona kodwa senza nesincomo esiyakumongameli ubaba Ramaphosa Matamela ukuthi anikezwe i-state funeral kaSokalisi.
So the ANC also reflecting its sadness. Let's bring in now IFP National Spokesperson Mkhuleko Hlengwa, who on a personal level, I must reflect that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi raised you as a parent and also raised you in your political career. In fact, you being one of the beneficiaries of his mentorship and young leadership in Parliament, to highlight a few aspects. Let's talk about what you're feeling right now before we get into what his legacy is or should be, how it should be reflected.
Well, this is a loss that has hit hard. It has taken its toll on one emotionally and psychologically. Not because we expect to be around forever, but the Prince was in hospital, he came out of hospital, and so he gave us hope. You know, we had the hope that our prayers had been answered. NgesiZulu, I can say unyenyile. Gave us the hope only to slip away into the good night quietly. And I'm thankful and grateful. I consider it one of the greatest privileges of my life to have sat at the feet of the Master, a person who mentored me, guided me, chided me, disciplined me, but all in an outlook to mold me for a particular purpose. And that is service to the people. Prince Buthelezi's life is defined by servant leadership and selflessness. And as a man of prayer and faith, he taught me the importance of those elements in leadership. Looking at his life, I can say that he's a man who loved his country and served it diligently. You speak, of course, about the mentorship. I was narrating a story earlier on that when we were flying back from Taiwan, we were in Hong Kong at the airport. To cut a long story short, he then said, don't forget that sometimes people call you the little Buthelezi. And I appreciated that. And I appreciated the fact that he was solid in his guidance. There was no favoritism. He called a spade and a shovel a shovel. But one would want to hasten to, particularly as this day draws to an end, on behalf of the Buthelezi family and the IFP, to thank all South Africans and people of the world for their messages of condolence and support in response to this very colossal loss, this national loss of this great South African. And I think all of us will find strength and comfort in knowing that in this difficult moment we are not alone. Prince Buthelezi lived a full life. He lived a long life in service of the people, and he died as he lived, in peace. And we now commit him into God's hands and pray that he be given, good rest, eternal rest. But we celebrate his life. But importantly, it is the commitment now that rests on all of us in the IFP family to take forward his mission and vision.
And that is definitely something that has been resonating here where we are. But I'm sure, Mkhuleko, over the years and even in this moment, you wouldn't be surprised at, the polarizing views as to how his legacy should be reflected. Many talking about those who've got wounds from the past, bullet wounds from the violence of the 90s, and they've placed that at the feet of Umntwana kaPhindangene, and some are really experiencing a different sense of sadness upon hearing the news of his passing. What are your reflections on that, as you have given a sort of a buffer of your reflections of his life, but certainly as the IFP needs to carry on going forward, it's certainly a different type of reflection.
Well, not everybody agreed with Christ. Prince Buthelezi was...
Are you likening him to Christ?
No, not likening him to Christ. I'm saying that differences in leadership and in outlook of any legacy are bound to happen. So
but even when they talk about violence and the wounds of people who still live with that.
20,000 people died in the low-intensity black-on-black civil war in this country. 20,000. 12,000 of them were IFP members and leaders. So he carries the deaths of people who are his followers, who are his supporters, and who are his colleagues. If we want to have a debate about that time, we can do so. Do we place the deaths of the IFP leaders and members at the feet of the president of the ANC at the time, Mr. Tambo? It would be reckless and irresponsible to sort of summarily want to scratch the surface of a complex history, because President Mbeki and Prince Buthelezi unveiled a memorial in Thokoza in 1999 of victims of that violence of both IFP and the ANC. Therefore, this conversation that is taking place, whilst people must reflect, I do find that it is an irresponsible knee-jerk reaction out of context of what happened. We can have that discussion, but at this point in time, we stand with the Buthelezi family in celebrating a life which we consider to be a life well lived, an exemplary life of leadership, an exemplary life of dedication to the cause of freedom. You know, in 2010, President Zuma in the SONA acknowledged the role by name of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi in the calling for the release of Nelson Mandela and other prisoners. You have got Mr. Mandela himself thanking Prince Buthelezi for that.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
so now, so what I do believe right now should actually be happening is that we have got a statesman who has passed on, who has given his life to the service of the people.
I'm sorry,
that is not
Mkhuleko.
in dispute. That he was a freedom fighter in his own right, to quote the words of Umamu Matizela Mandela.
All right, Mkhuleko Hlengwa, passionate, of course, about reflecting on the legacy of the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Of course, as the family is mourning, it's also something that I know he wouldn't have been surprised to have seen taking place, Kathy, but certainly it's going to continue to unfold over the coming days. As I speak to you now, cars are entering and exiting the homestead of Kwapindangene, the home of the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and over the days there'll be lots to come, prayers and reflections even from the royal family and the IFP.